All right, welcome LinkedIn. Welcome everybody here live with us. And so now what we'll do is we'll let Katrina Rogers, our guest, introduce yourself and who you're with, what your whole thing. And if you want to do what everyone else here did and tell us what you have going on this spring, that'd be great. And then we'll fire away. Before we jump into that, just a little bit of housekeeping. So the first thing is, this is really designed to be a conversation. So I come prepared with questions, but it's so much better if it's not just me asking all the questions. So if you think of anything, if you have anything specific to innovation clusters or anything that you know Katrina is up to, by all means, raise your hand, throw something at us as long as it's not coffee, and we'll answer. Also, for the group that's joining us on LinkedIn Live, if you have questions, hit it into the chat and I'll relay them to Katrina. The other thing is, we don't have a guest lined up for May or June, so stay tuned for that. But starting in September, we will be moving from this facility to the Hive, which is a Spokane Public Library facility. And our guest in September will be Mark Pond, and he'll come to talk about all the cool business things that the library has available to folks like us. So that'll be exciting. Stay tuned for May and June and details on those ones. So, Katrina, who are you? What are you doing here? What's going on?
Well, thanks, Josh, and thanks for inviting me to be on Business Brew.
Yes.
So I'm a quality and leadership expert, and I have over 25 years of experience in pharmaceutical and medical device discovery, development, and manufacturing. And I get to leverage that expertise in several different ways. I have my own professional services firm where I help innovators and investors get their medical products from bench to bedside. I am an adjunct faculty member at Washington State University in the College of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences right here in beautiful Spokane, Washington. And then I'm also have the great pleasure of being the CEO of Evergreen Bioscience Innovation Cluster. And that's what we're here to talk about today.
What don't you do at this point? I think, how many things did you just list? Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's just the business stuff that I do.
So for those of us who don't know, let's start with just a basic definition. Tell us about innovation clusters and what is that? What even is that?
This is the number one question everybody asks me. And my answer is always, nobody knows.
Okay, fair enough.
And the reason nobody knows is that each one is unique. So there have been academic studies, people thinking, well, innovation clusters, what are they? How do we build one? Nobody really has any good pin down on that. However, what we do know is that a modern innovation cluster can be loosely defined as an industry-led collaboration of members from 5 economic sectors. And the economic sectors are industry, government, academy, and that typically, those groups typically formed old-style innovation clusters. Modern innovation clusters also add the entrepreneur and the capital partners. And when I think of capital partners, I think of more than just money. I think about folks who do land surveying or do real estate, and because capital is anything that you need in order to operate your business. So all innovation clusters are organized around a vertical, and Evergreen Biosciences is the life sciences, and very specifically the contract services for the life sciences space in pharmaceuticals and medical devices to begin with, but we anticipate that that's going to expand.
All right, so I missed them. I have 4 of the 5. I have government. You didn't say academia, but that was the general idea, right?
Yeah.
Okay, entrepreneurs.
Capital, business.
Capital,
yeah.
That's what I'm missing. All right.
Industry or corporate, sometimes that's how it's also put.
All right, so for those of you taking notes like me, those are the 5. All right, So you said life sciences is what Evergreen Bioscience Innovation Cluster is all about, but you said contract services. For those of us who don't know that field, tell us a little bit about what that means.
All right, so to get a new medical product from that early discovery stage all the way to commercial, where it's actually for sale and available to patients and doctors, there's a lot of steps in between. Easily, the cartoon that I show typically has about 12 steps. There's probably more than that. Each one of those steps take a specific kind of data and a specific set of expertise to get through. Nowadays, what we find is that a lot of the innovators, and this is true for any business, right? When you start a business, you don't know what you don't know, and there's a lot of things you're going to learn along the way. Well, some of this expertise is really expensive. It takes very expensive instrumentation and facilities to operate. So we know that companies, small to large, are using contract services to leverage their capital to be very capital efficient, while at the same time meeting those development milestones and expanding their capacity. Okay. So a great example for contract services would be contract manufacturing of a drug substance.
So you're
or
not
drug
doing it
product.
on your own. You're
That's
relying
correct.
on a third party to.
You contract
okay.
with a third party who has all of the expertise, all of the facilities, all of the quality systems that they need in order to make their facility run, and you work together with them, and they join your project team and they work together with you to make your product real.
So I don't know where everyone else is at on this, but I remember life science as like a class I took in maybe middle school or high school, which is really where it was like biology light. So will you give us the modern day or this version? So it's all definition, I guess, right now, but what does life sciences mean in this context?
So life sciences covers a pretty wide range. In our context, we're trying to focus, because you've got to focus somewhere to start with, we're trying to focus on the needs of the pharmaceutical and medical device community, because we recognize that our region, the 4-state region that is around us, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Montana, we already have a lot of assets in that space, both for life sciences, but the contract service area as well. And then we also, we know that we all have a passion to develop this sector in our region as well. And so that's why we lean into the life sciences for this space in order to develop that part of the sector.
Okay.
We've got a question over there.
Out of curiosity, when you're dealing with contract services, specifically in pharmaceutical manufacturing, how much of that is offshore, particularly in Eurasia?
Hold on just one second. I got to relay that to our audience. So the question was, when we're dealing with a contract services, especially in manufacturing, how much of that is overseas or offshore? So not in the US. So.
Right. Actually, surprisingly little.
Oh.
So at the beginning of the pandemic, we estimated that the need for a sterile medicine manufacturing, that final drug product, the capacity that we had worldwide was 100 million vials. The demand that we were going to need, starting with the pandemic and going forward, was over 300 billion vials. So what we're seeing is quite a bit of investment in that new space, and that's a very capital-intensive business. So it's pretty surprising how much investment is happening, but a lot of it's happening here in the United States, because it's a lot easier to work with. This is very complex work. It's much easier to get your facility qualified and to get moving forward. We're seeing some reshoring because there have been some issues with supply chain and managing supply chain that have then created some health issues. So the NMDA issue in with like the losartan and some of the heart medications that have been withdrawn because they've got an impurity in there. That impurity is coming from a raw material that's being used very early on in the production, but the impurity is coming through the production line because there's nothing that removes it in the process.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you don't know, if you don't know what's happening out in that far space, if people are buying things based on price or because that's what they can get, then you end up with these outcomes at the far end that they're not productive, right? And so it's contrary to a good quality system.
And we have some manufacturing happening in this area, right? Now, Selkirk Pharma just built.
Selkirk Pharma,
Okay.
they're a new startup. Jubilant Hollister Steer, though,
Yep.
lots of people don't know that they're here in Hilliard. They've been here over 100 years. And they do both. They have their own line of allergenic products, as well as they do commercial sterile fill finish for some of the big guys.
So they
big
do
pharma.
contract services,
That's correct.
in our own backyard. Oh, that's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. And they're building new lines. So that's happening right here in Spokane.
So unless I missed another question, Evergreen Bioscience is sort of headquartered here in Spokane. What's your territory? What range is that covering? You said 4 states. Are you trying to cover 4 states with that cluster? Do innovation cluster, are they confined to a geographic area?
Well, I guess they get started in a geographic area. We aim to be a global innovation cluster.
Okay.
So we're pretty, we're young. We're only a year old right now. So these are ambitious goals, and you've got to have a BHAG if you're going to get anywhere. We don't see boundaries as a reason to restrict our activities. We have some folks we have some brand new members, as a matter of fact, from Colorado.
Okay.
Doing some really interesting work in clinical trial engagement. We've got some folks in Utah. We've got people in Montana, of course. Naturally, there's lots happening in Alberta and British Columbia. We want to engage with those folks too.
So it is now international in terms of...
We're working to become international, and I've had conversations with the folks at Life Sciences Queensland. They've got that's an innovation cluster that's down in Queensland in Australia. Wow. And there's just lots of, the nice thing about it is we don't have to do it all ourselves. We can collaborate with other innovation clusters that have a similar outlook to us and want to do things and want to start working together.
So what's the deliverable that you're aiming at? Like if this all goes according to plan, what does success look like for this innovation cluster?
Right. For our region, what we aim to do is create and sustain relationships. So that networking piece and really helping people know what services are here, what can entrepreneurs who can entrepreneurs work with, which entrepreneurs can the businesses work with here locally, right? Build our own regional life sciences ecosystem. We aim to identify, prioritize, and partially fund projects.
Oh.
Right? Projects are a big thing that innovation clusters do. And then we also aim to elevate the name recognition of our companies nationally and regionally and globally.
So if I'm in my house or in my garage and I think of some kind of medical device, like wouldn't it be great if we had this? What you're saying is that an innovation cluster is going to help folks like that, among others, but it's going to help things like that actually get that project off the ground in some ways. Okay.
Correct. The intent is to help people who are interested in the medical product space.
Okay.
Solve the problems that exist, and the problem solving could be more than just making a brand new treatment, a therapy. It could be solving a problem that the industry has itself. Some of the pre-competitive problems that, say, a fill-finish manufacturer might face, we could solve. What about, there are challenges with warehousing, like CGMP warehousing. There's challenges with distribution. There are all kinds of things that people face all the time that we want to engage smart people who are in those business areas to work with the industry and figure out how to solve those problems.
So one of our guests here live in the room mentioned that there's a pitch competition coming up next month. Mm-hmm. Are you looking at doing things like that as a way to encourage people to maybe start thinking in this space in a way that they haven't before?
That's one of the things we've thought about. We're also pulling together some what we think are very useful training opportunities too. So since we're regional, we're trying to kind of lean more towards virtual events because I don't want to ask my members in Montana to be driving over here to Spokane all the time. I mean, it's a wonderful place to visit, but every weekend, no, I don't think so. So things like, how do you use social media for marketing and business development? These are questions that I hear all the time from folks who are in sales and business development. So we think a series on that would be really valuable for more than just the industry, but we think the industry would be very interested in it.
Okay.
Working on intellectual property from within. How does a business, an existing business, manage and handle their intellectual property? That's a question that I get asked all the time too. Right?
Okay, so if there's an organization here or somebody watching online that's interested in this, it feels like a good place for them to get connected. Is it a membership-based thing where it's a fee-based? Is it just raise your hand and you're in?
We are a membership-based organization. Okay. We have just received acknowledgement from the IRS of our 501c3 status, so that's we are a nonprofit and registered as a Washington Nonprofit Corporation. Our website is evergreenbioinnovation.com, and Josh, I know you'll have that in the video too, and it'll be available. We are actively looking for folks to join us. We have innovation teams, and we're actively looking for people who want to work on some of these projects that we're pulling together. And it's an exciting time. I like to think of it as getting in on the ground floor of something that's going to be really big.
So the purpose, unless there's other questions.
There's another question.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay,
so dental innovation, that's absolutely, those are medical devices. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Okay, so it's everything kind of healthcare related.
So in vitro diagnostics.
Okay.
This is the tricky thing about, you think pharmaceuticals, that covers biologicals as well as small molecules. But medical devices covers a really wide range of different sorts of things. So if you think it might have a medical or therapeutic application, it's probably smart to find out before you get further on down the path, because if there are some regulatory implications, you want to make sure that you're covering those from the very get-go and getting the data you need.
Just for clarity, we're talking human-based only ideas and projects, or
I think long-term, because many companies also work in the animal field, and many things are very applicable too. A lot of human medicines have been ported to animal health in recent years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. So it is really, that's why you said, we don't really know what this is because
Right.
it's so big of an idea.
Canine cardiology is very similar to human cardiology.
Is it really?
It is.
I had no idea. I'm sure all the pet parents out there are like, duh. And I'm like, I have kids. I don't need pets. Okay, so the purpose here was to talk about how to build one and why.
Right.
So let's talk about that journey. Like, whose brainchild was this, and how did it get legs? And then let's dovetail that into why
Yeah.
we would do it.
When I look back at this is kind of, for me, it's kind of a funny story. So in last year was 2022, so in 2021, in June, we get a call from Stephanie Scott, who's with the Washington State Department of Commerce. And she said to us, us is a small team of people, sort of the usual suspects that have been running around Spokane, kind of trying to pull together a life science ecosystem for about a year. Most of us worked with within the WSU campus system, so that's kind of how we got together. She called us up and said, hey, we want to start an incubator or an accelerator for innovation clusters. And we're like, great, what's an innovation cluster?
Same questions we had today.
Same questions. So it turns out that Commerce wanted to pull together this accelerator. They call it the Innovation Cluster Accelerator Program. And they had met with some international cluster experts, among whom is Christian Rangan, who is a consultant for the project.
Okay.
And they had some funds, wanted to see if they could do some intentional work to build innovation clusters around the sectors that are important for Washington State. So things like clean energy, aerospace, obviously. So we're like, hey, we've got all these resources here in Spokane, life sciences, Eastern Washington, and then we're seeing things happening in Idaho, we're seeing things happening in Montana. We think there's a really interesting regional play here. Let's do a life science cluster. We are the only life science cluster in the ICAP program. We submitted, it was a competitive process. We submitted the first round. We missed because we had a technical issue with our application. Yay. But we corrected it and got in on the second round.
Okay.
So we received our first funding in March of 2022. I came on board in April 2022, so we're just a little bit over a year old now. And we've just been going great guns ever since.
We did get Nathan's over there doing his best charades I've ever seen, trying to tell me that we got a question that didn't come through live. So we'll get to yours, Horatio, here in just one second. But Colin online. Now, this is funny because Colin and I are in the MBA program together at Whitworth, and right now we're in strategic management, and the whole class is focused on thinking strategically and asking, strategic questions. So he said, are you going to ask about competitive advantage and what they may see, so innovation cluster may see on the periphery as a future challenge? So are you seeing any challenges coming in, anything operating at the periphery, anything that the innovation cluster is thinking of in terms of, does anybody compete in this space?
So I don't see that. So I don't see that we have necessarily competitors. We have collaborators, and that's really the thing about innovation clusters is everybody who's out there doing. There's more than enough work to go around.
Okay.
So everybody out there is a potential collaborator. So people often ask me, well, what about the state bio associations? Life Science Washington, Oregon Bio. Every state has their own bio association. These folks are the traditional trade associations for the life sciences. And a trade association is a little different than an innovation cluster. An innovation cluster is focused more on business development, which I think unless you're a business developer, that sounds like a lot of hand waving. But fundamentally, trade associations do support the businesses, but they tend to be very geographically focused. An innovation cluster is looking more regionally, and they're looking more nationally and internationally as well. And thinking about, how do we work together in order to build out in the spaces that our industry, our vertical needs.
Is there an example, and maybe there's not, of somebody looking to privatize this, to take it from a nonprofit model to a business, like a profit generating model? Or is that not really, you were always worried about big business coming in and, snatching up good ideas. Is there an opportunity to turn this into something that's not a nonprofit?
Yeah, I think there is. And I think there are possibilities for the cluster to have more than one business model.
Okay.
So Business model it's a significant conversation with the board right now. What does it look like? Our first funding has been 100% government. A modern innovation cluster moves to a more robust business model that has a mix of funding sources. What we ultimately want to try to do is lean on grants as a project funding source, so that we can pull together the project beforehand, think about what all the people who might be working on it, what's the concept, really get it developed. Then when the funding comes down the pike, we've got this package ready to make the application. It makes the application process easier, rather than trying to back in and fit funding sources to, fit projects into funding sources.
Horatio, you had a question. Go ahead.
Yes. By the way, a lot, but just one. Is because I'm working with SCORE, and we know that a lot startups and small business, especially small business, the most problem that they face is access to capital. And when that's, innovation cluster means a lot of things, that's a big company, they have the money that they can spend and invest, because, probably the county or several county is going to give they're going to give them a lot of facility. But how do you think when you think in innovation cluster and access to capital to those persons, to those small business or startups, for example, an SBA and CDFI or grants that is going to be involved to help and to approach, because clusters mean we're going to develop the economy local, state, or several county. That's what I understand. So what do you think about this problem that not just cluster face?
Yeah. No.
So the question is about capital, access to capital, specifically around small businesses and startups. So I'll let you fire away now.
Right. So from my perspective, access to capital is entirely a relationship issue. It's entirely about building those relationships. And we don't have to look very far to see good evidence that that is why areas like Boston and San Francisco have been very successful. It's because people have opportunities to network, to get out there, to meet entrepreneurs when they're at an early stage, when they're still working on their project, just to kind of understand what's happening and to help guide and learn about a project because all of that up front, it's essentially upfront research that allows an investor to be comfortable putting money into a situation. The other piece of it is helping the entrepreneurs learn. As I mentioned earlier, you don't know what you don't know. You've got your technical expertise, you know something very much, you may be very strong in one part of the business. You're going to have to learn a lot of things, but more importantly, you're going to need to lean on a lot of other people to help you get to where you want to go. And so it's a give and take. This is why the networking and relationship building is just a key part of cluster work.
So if you're an innovator, entrepreneur, startup, or even maybe a business that's already got a product or two, being involved in this is a good idea, because you're connecting all these resources in sort of one area.
Right.
And it may not be a physical space, but membership means, or being involved means that you're going to connect me with the resources I might need.
Right.
How does the regulatory part of this fit in? Are you working with companies or organizations that help on the regulatory side, like getting approval? Because the FDA process is not for the faint of heart, right? It's labor intensive, right?
Right.
So are you connecting with those resources as well?
Right, and we have we already have folks who are members who have that expertise, and we're developing in that space as well. So I think that's a question that everybody asks quite often. If you're doing a medical product, you're thinking about that regulatory framework. And in some ways, the first thing you should be thinking about is really how you're going to sell it and to whom. What's that market going to look like? Because that ends up determining quite often what your regulatory framework is going to be.
Really? Okay.
And that is a harder question to answer than, even though the regulations seem very complicated, and it's a winding path. The right market fit is a harder question to answer than the right regulatory fit.
Really?
It is.
So people have all these great ideas about a medical product or medical device, and they typically, that's where they stumble, is
Yep.
who will actually, that seems so.
They need to figure out, they need to test their market to figure out, is it the right market, and is it the right product for that market? It does. It's such simple advice, yet everybody always thinks about, all the complicated stuff that you have to do. Don't think about the complicated stuff. Just go out there with, draw a picture of it and start showing it to people and saying, this is what I want to do. Would you buy it? And how, because you could ask people questions. Well, if you were going to buy it, how would you buy it? Do you go through? Would you buy it directly through your medical office? Do you work with a hospital system? You can learn an amazing amount of things with a picture or a little mocked-up device, just going to people showing things.
Does your organization take any kind of a position on a board, percentage of ownership, or licensing fee, anything like that? And second part, real quick, with the trade associations, when you work with them, do you find them to be more protectionist?
So the question is, do you have a stake in any of the products that come through it or anything? Is the innovation cluster looking to get, a percentage of the product or on the board? And then the PS to that was, do the trade associations see this as competitive, or are they protective of their space?
Yeah, we are not yet investing in companies. I think if we go to that as part of the business model, I think I would lean. Of course, the board would tell me whether we could do this or not, but I would lean towards forming a separate social purpose corporation in order to hold those assets. Had some conversations about, maybe some very innovative tech transfer models that might allow that IP to be held by such a social purpose corporation. So it's a great question. There are interesting conversations around it, but I think I wouldn't intend to have the corporation control anything at this point. Right?
Because that's the kind of before we get to that second part of that question,
Right.
that's kind of the model now for other startup incubator type models, which is you can come into this incubator, get help, but then we maybe want a piece of that pie, and that's how we fund ourselves.
Yeah, and you see that out of university tech transfer offices all the time. They
Okay.
think, oh, we want another Gatorade. I'm like, you're never going to have another Gatorade if you strangle the IP. I'm sorry.
Okay.
And you can tie an order book to a dog's tail and turn him loose in the city, and boy, you'll get a couple of orders, but you won't get very much.
Yeah. And so, so then how do the trade associations fit into this? Are they, are they playing nice?
So Life Science Washington is a supporter of ours.
Okay.
And so that, we participate them. We'll be at Life Science Washington Innovation Northwest coming up here. They do help support us. We're part of they're part of the ecosystem.
Okay.
People do ask me, that there is a competitive position. We're trying to figure out what our members want. There are some opportunities, I think, for us to offer members some services that Life Science Washington has historically offered. Things like lab setup discounts or benefits, employee benefits, things like that. But we're going to let our members tell us what it is that they need and want.
So we have folks in the room from SCORE, which is SBA organization that does free business mentorship. We have somebody here from Greater Spokane Incorporated. Are those organizations playing along right now, or do you have to do some recruiting after we're done here?
And this is why we're doing events like this, because I think it's an awareness piece.
Yeah.
We have to get out there. We have to let people know that we're trying to bring people together. We want you on our list. We're building a supplier directory. We want to make sure that everybody who offers some kind of service to this community is part of that supplier directory. And that we want people to bring their ideas about how we can serve the community better.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Is this all related to medical applications or any ideas that could be very innovative?
So the question is it related just healthcare, or is it any idea?
So I think we're trying to focus our efforts in the context of medical product entrepreneurship, but also the contract service space that serves that medical product entrepreneurship. So there could be, I think, some innovative ideas that maybe might be in finance or might be in, in some of the capital spaces, especially. I think we don't see as much innovation there as maybe maybe there is hunger for. Obviously, innovation involves risk, so the financial sector, the capital sector typically is very risk averse. But So I think there's an opportunity, to answer your question, I think there's an opportunity to look at innovations that are allied with that, but what we're trying to do is keep ourselves focused. I think in the life sciences space more broadly, in addition to animal health, we've got, agriculture is a big thing here in the Northwest, and life science is agriculture. We have the President's executive order organizing the federal government on efforts towards biomanufacturing, biotechnology and biomanufacturing. That's part of this conversation too. Materials, and we have some collaborations with some other very allied sectors as well, which I think we'll probably talk about here.
Yeah,
too.
so if I have just like a cool widget that I think is a great idea, it's probably not the right fit unless there's a healthcare application.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
which is fine.
That would be, yeah.
Are there innovation clusters in our area that do cater to other business sectors?
Yes.
Okay.
Aerospace.
Okay.
Right. In the innovation cluster, we've got advanced computing, quantum computing.
Oh.
We've got sustainable aviation fuels and sustainable aviation in general. We have a couple of other clean energy. Washington Vertical is around clean, foundation around clean nuclear energy, but trying to make a net zero sustainable future, starting with clean nuclear energy. And then, so we have aerospace clusters. I'm sorry?
Anything around ag?
No, interestingly enough, the first ICAP cohort does not have any ag. We do have, so Washington State is the home of Washington Maritime Blue, which was the nation's, I think, first intentional innovation cluster.
Really?
They were formed out of the governor's office and Washington State Department of Commerce. It's kind of how Commerce got the idea about having the cluster accelerator, was seeing the success of Maritime Blue. And they are obviously a maritime cluster. They're interested in the blue economy.
Okay.
What about technology? And technology, yes. WTIA has an innovation cluster too, the Washington Technology Industry Association. And so those are the ones that are focused on that 5G computing and the quantum computing.
Is there like a national innovation cluster super conference where all of you get together and talk about what you...
No, but there's an international one.
Oh, is there? Okay.
Yeah, so there's an international cluster organization. It's called TCI.
Okay.
And we have, Washington Commerce has membership, and they have some, they have seats for us to participate. That conference has, they have virtual events. They have a conference to which Stephanie Scott goes to on a regular basis. And we've had a chance to visit some of the sites in Finland and in Norway. The Nordic countries have a pretty good concentration of innovation clusters, and are kind of naturally aligned with what we do here in the Northwest.
Did I see a hand up? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Just a follow-up question is, do you have within your organization anybody with angel capital?
Do you have any capital angel investors, anything like that?
We have some supporters who are angel investors, but we don't yet have any members.
And then anything bigger than that? Any funding sources bigger than an angel?
Like a bank? Or,
yeah,
again, supporters, just
Okay.
not yet. We're in the process of bringing those folks in as
That
members.
would be a good source of capital, in which somebody says, hey, if there is something there, yep, here is capital.
Right.
We'll fund the project.
Right.
If it is a project that sounds interesting, and that would be a good resource.
Right. And that, I think, it's really about, this first year has really been about what can the innovation cluster show to people that demonstrates the value add of the organization. And it gets to the innovation teams and the projects that we're working on. I think Anaya?
Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned at the beginning that one of the things your innovation cluster focuses on is promoting, your members and creating that awareness. What are the main ways you do that for a startup or maybe a newer company compared to an older company like Jubilant Pharma, especially if they have, a narrative or sort of a mission that they want to change or shift?
So the question is around how do you promote your startups, and then how do you maybe versus a larger corporation that's maybe already a member?
Right. Well, we make sure to let the membership and the folks who communicate with us, right, who receive our information, know about our members as they join. They are also, we also feature them on our website. We have a members area, members only area, and are building this supplier directory that will have a couple of levels. The members will be able to build a trust network across the platform and share a more intimate connection and have more opportunities to connect person to person through the supplier directory. There'll be a top level that we call the ecosystem actors map that will let people understand sort of where everybody is in our region, whether they're a member or not.
You're going to launch a podcast? I mean, that's what everybody's doing these days, right? Are you going to have the Evergreen Bioscience Innovation Cluster podcast?
Well, I think that Colin mentioned this earlier, asked us about what are the challenges that I see right away, and scaling, right?
Yeah.
So we are a classic startup organization. So, how do you scale? How do you figure out what you do first? How do you take all the many opportunities that you have and you go after? Our staff is all part-time.
Okay.
So we are working to figure out, what is the first thing, what is the second thing. Jessie Arter, who's our
Yep.
communications consultant. She works very hard. We're in the process. We're kind of trying to focus on, what is the hottest item that we need to do right now in order to make sure that we go forward. Podcast has not yet been.
Well, the library,
That's it.
Mark is here from
That's
the
it.
library, and they have
Podcast-
podcasting space.
Podcast hasn't come up on the up above the fold yet. However, I mean, I've got colleagues like you, and I've got colleagues like Mark. When people ask me, could we talk to you about innovation clusters? I'm like, I'm there.
Yeah. Every time, it's like every week you hear somebody new. Howie Mandel has a podcast. I didn't even know
Right.
until there was controversy around it. Well, and we want to avoid that. So maybe staying out of it for the time. Okay, so you're talking about how, and I just want to make sure I have the first step for you or for the Evergreen Bioscience was through the Washington State Department of Commerce and some funding. So is that how most of them get started, is through some government body is offering funding, or do they sometimes just start even more grassroots than that? So if I was thinking of starting one,
Right.
that maybe there's a gap
Sure.
somewhere in the market.
Right. Well, typically you have to get a collaboration of people together,
Okay.
and this is true of any work, right? You have to get some people together who are willing to work together and do something, and then propose to do something. The money will come along,
Okay.
But you don't want to go look for money first and then try to round up people later. That's not a really good way to do it. I think historically, innovation clusters have formed when people from at least 3 or 4 of the sectors
Okay.
get together and say, hey, we already have some resources. Let's start working more intentionally together to build out on what we have,
Yeah.
and to fit pieces intentionally into this ecosystem.
So we haven't really even talked about this yet, but I know GSI at one point, or somebody was promoting that there's something like 11 higher educational institutions in just this pocket. Are the universities on board? Are they being friendly? Are they eager? I would think that with the new healthcare campus between the universities, that there would be a lot of excitement around this.
Right. And there is a lot of excitement around this. We're forming. And you mentioned GSI. I want to make sure to mention that they are a partner. We are forming in partnership with them.
Okay.
And they are our fiscal
I didn't know.
sponsor.
I mean, I didn't want to say,
Sure.
talk out of turn
Yeah.
with the
No,
GSI in the room.
They are our fiscal sponsor,
Okay.
and we're forming in partnership with them.
Got it.
But the universities are quite naturally very interested,
Okay.
and that we have regular conversations with folks from University of Washington, WSU, Gonzaga, Whitworth, and Eastern.
Okay.
And we have yet to really engage, I think, in quite a bit with the University of Idaho and North Idaho College, but I see that coming.
They all, I mean, even the community colleges, they're all offering some training opportunities in healthcare, right?
That's correct.
From certified nurses all the way up to registered nurses now.
And there's
with
huge demand for it.
Okay.
So we've historically been we have a large catchment area for healthcare.
Yeah.
And so we've historically been a very strong healthcare city and region. That continues and will continue. But what we also want to try to do is make sure that people are not forgetting that we have a very robust manufacturing industry.
Yeah.
And we need skilled technical workforce for that. And part of that skilled technical workforce needs to be CGMP compliant so that we can staff our actively growing the manufacturing space for drugs and medical devices.
There's a need for, I didn't realize, I know that healthcare, obviously, we need
Yep.
all the help we can get there,
Right.
but in the manufacturing side, you're saying there's also a demand there.
There's a huge demand there.
Okay, so
And-
all those with kids in high
Right.
school, be paying attention
Right.
as you're trying to help guide them into what could be next.
A big piece can be about just awareness that these roles, that the companies exist, right? Who knows? You know, I've often people said, there's a giant manufacturing facility in Hilliard?
Yeah.
What? Yeah. People just don't know.
So we're coming up on about 15 minutes. I want to make sure we get to one of the big things that just was announced, that Evergreen Bioscience was a recipient of a pretty good sized grant.
Right.
So tell us all about that, just
Right.
because I know that kind of is leaning toward permanency of what you're looking at doing.
Right, right. So while we aim to be a regional play, we know Spokane is our, this is our founding city, this is our home. We recognize that one of the things Spokane needs to build more out in its life science space is we need space for our life science entrepreneurs to have their businesses. We don't have a lot of wet lab space for entrepreneurs to graduate into from our incubator, SP3 Northwest. And we recognize, I think, that we're missing out on the conversation with companies that might want to move here because we don't have that space. We don't have a landing space for them to move into. We formed an innovation team. It's our Bioscience Innovation Building. And that team got together and wrote a grant application and submitted it to Washington Commerce and won $200,000 for an Evergreen Manufacturing Growth Grant. And the purpose of that grant will be to conduct design exploration and do site selection and that early design work so that we can build this building that will have not only the graduation space, we envision it having some landing space for people to come in, who are life sciences companies want to move in. They need a landing space while they're getting their facility finished. We want to have some event space. We want to have collaboration areas so that the entrepreneurs, and we also really want to have a training facility there too.
Oh, okay.
We want to be able to bring in students from all levels so they can see the entrepreneurs at work, they can talk to people, the entrepreneurs can come into we're going to have a classroom so that entrepreneurs can give presentations and really start to engage the industry with our academic sector.
When you talk about there being, shortages in workers, I know the other manufacturing sectors in our area, like welding and things like that, they're engaging at the middle school, high school level as a means of recruiting. Their talent development process, they've recognized, has to start earlier in the thing. So they're often doing tours of Wagstaff and some of the facilities. So it makes sense that you would want to engage students in a hands-on kind of to see it.
Right.
Because right now it's like, I go manufacture biopharmaceuticals. That doesn't sound that.
Yeah. Well, you think about it as skills, like as you pointed out, welding or machining. People don't go to learn machining because I want to be a machinist. No, they learn how to machine because they want to make something cool, like a rocket or an airplane. So you have to help people recognize that that's the connection, and that there's the skill connection, there's the long-term opportunities connection. We're living longer, so our careers are going to be longer, and people get bored after 10 years doing something, and they want to do something different. So you have to help them see that there is a career progression, that you can grow and expand, and you don't have to stay one thing. You can if you want to, and some people do, and they're really great at it. But we need those folks too. But we need people who want different opportunities, and we want to start attracting people back to our region that have educated here but had to go someplace else because we didn't have the jobs for them.
So you mentioned the hospital systems in our area. Are they on board? I know they're more downstream in terms of whether or not a product's going to, the infancy of a product, they're so far removed from that being something that they could use. But are they engaged in the work the cluster's doing? Are they active partners?
Absolutely. So, and obviously the HR departments are really very interested.
Okay.
But what we're also trying to do is help the hospitals think of us as an opportunity for their physicians, because quite often physician entrepreneurs, how do you enter that space?
Every orthodontist I know has a side hustle. It's so weird. Like they are always thinking of ways to not do orthodontia.
Right. Well, because they want to make their life easier.
Right.
They're like, if only I had this. Well, how do you make something like that real? And, again, you went to school to be an orthodontist. You didn't go to school to be, and you ended up being a business person.
Right,
you got your own practice. But being a business person with your own practice is only sort of orthogonally aligned to being an entrepreneur. So it's, you're going to need help in making that real. And gosh, we've got a community that could be organized to make that happen.
That does make sense, as a value add. Come work at Sacred Heart, for example, where we have a great pipeline for your side hustle or your idea that you dreamed up.
Or do you want to be, have you longed to be a principal investigator
Oh,
for
yeah.
clinical work?
Okay.
Or do you have patient communities that could potentially be engaged, and that would allow you to expand your treatment plans if you could learn how to be a principal investigator and have the clinical coordinator staff that you need in order to do that work.
All right, so now you have to tell us about that, because I kind of know, because we work together, what the heck is a principal investigator? I know there's a real world explanation for that
Right.
beyond that really great term.
So principal investigator, this is a term that's used in grants and all sorts of things, but in the context of a clinical trial, this is the person who oversees
Okay.
the work of the trial. So they need to understand. The trial protocol. They need to understand the good clinical practice regulations around operating a clinical trial. Things like informed consent, proper record keeping. Making sure that the treatments, if it's a blinded trial, the treatments are handled properly, so everything is blinded. If it's not, how is it so that everything operates according to what the pre-approved protocol has been written.
So you're a general practitioner or a physician, and you see patients all day long,
Right.
and there's a new developmental drug, and you have the ability to oversee that in your practice.
Right, and
Okay.
people typically will start that work by not being the principal investigator, but like being a co-investigator. They'll learn how to do it
Got
by
it,
working
okay.
with somebody who already knows how, as part of a multi-site trial. The company in Colorado that's working with us now, that's one of the things they do is help sites, help sites develop trust relationships with patients,
Okay.
and help patients recognize where trials could be, so that the patients and their physicians can go and enroll in.
Okay. So as we wind down, we've got about 8 minutes-ish or so. Any events that you have coming up that are on Evergreen Bioscience's radar, anything that we should know about if we're curious or want to support what you have going on?
Right, and you asked me what I was going to do this spring.
Yes.
And I'm going to try to enjoy the lovely weather that we have in the spring while I'm traveling around like a crazy person.
Excellent.
So going to be, at the end of this month, I'm going to be at Life Science, Washington's Life Science Innovation Northwest in Seattle. It's a day and a half of networking and interacting with life science companies that are all across, it tends to be all across that kind of, really focused on the Western Washington space, but they do attract people from a little wider area, so looking to connect with folks there. We'll be heading down to the Tri-Cities to talk with our colleagues at Washington Vertical, the Clean Energy Cluster, about kind of things that we want to do working together as a cross-sector organization. In May, I'm going to be out for the Tech Alliances Luncheon, again to Seattle. And then in June, and at the end of May, we've got the I-90 Aerospace Conference. So we're sponsoring a breakout session on the commonalities between aerospace, biotech, and clean energy. When you think about advanced manufacturing, there's a lot of things that are very similar there. So working together makes a lot of sense. Then in early June, we come back here to Spokane for the Life Science Washington East-West Summit, which will be on the campus of WSU.
Wow.
And then I think I have to go. Oh, that's right. I just got invited to go to DC for the National Institute for Innovation in Manufacturing Biopharmaceuticals Conference.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's in June?
That's in June, at the
Oh
end
my
of June.
gosh.
Yeah, it'll be all sticky and hot. So
Are
it won't be-
you, yeah. Is Evergreen Bioscience planning any of their own events where we can come learn more? I know you don't have like a physical space yet, but are you holding any events for your members? I know you said with a diversity of members and from a variety of states and
Right.
locations, it's kind of difficult to do physical things. Do you have any virtual things, physical things that you have coming up?
We don't have anything right now on
Okay.
the schedule, but we are, like I mentioned, we're trying to organize the, that would be this fall, a social media
Okay.
class. Would be like a 6-week class every other week.
Got it.
That would be very focused on kind of that social media for marketing and sales. And then also, you might kick this off in the summertime, but this might also be in the fall, looking at what is it? How to handle the IP that your
Okay.
business creates.
Yeah.
So those would be we would be focusing those on virtual events. We are sponsoring the SP3 Northwest, our local business incubator, their lunch and learn events this quarter. So yesterday we heard about how to start a high growth business from Dan Wadkins of Foster Garvey, and then we've got another couple coming up. I can't recall what what the individual topics are. And we have our very first annual member meeting at the end of this month, and you can find out more on our website and register, and it's going to be open to everybody who's really interested in finding out more about what we're doing with the Innovation Cluster.
I may have missed it. Is there a fee currently to be a member?
Yes.
And what
there
is that? Is it like
depends.
levels?
There's levels.
Okay.
Depends on the size of your organization.
Okay.
So, and all that's on the website.
Excellent. You don't have a gala? This town loves galas. There's a gala like every week. You don't have a big Evergreen Bioscience gala
Again,
formal event?
Josh, we're a part-time organization. I think we wanted to deliver something that we see has measurable value.
Yeah.
And while a gala's fun, I think it's better for us to lean into the events that are already
Sure.
happening, that folks are doing a great job of organizing, and then work on the things that folks aren't organizing.
Awesome.
That
All
we
right.
can do.
Last chance for questions. Go ahead, Victor.
Quick question: do you, as an organization, have some sort of a tour of a facility that does pharmaceutical?
No, we do not yet have any
That-
facility
because
tours.
that would be a good-
Yeah.
That would be a good thing. So this is actually pretty interesting. I've done talent development work in the space before I became the CEO. And for those of you who are not familiar with what KSP is doing for Career Connect, for careerconnectnorthwest.org, they do videos of jobs and facilities that people can go to. They've got some excellent videos of some of the roles at Jubilant Hollister Steer. One of the challenges with touring a CGMP facility is, I think particularly in the pandemic, they had to be locked down from a
PPE or
security
whatever,
and
yeah.
safety issue, right?
Yeah.
But even more than that, the facility has to be pretty carefully controlled, so access isn't as easy as we might think. But I do, I'm looking to get together with those folks again, and maybe we could think about how we might be able to do that, at least on a virtual.
I was going to say a
perspective.
virtual tour sounds like the
Be
right
right
call.
up the
Yeah.
alley. Mhm.
Awesome. Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned one of the challenges right now is scalability, and early on, just in your experience, what is most important to overcoming
So what's
challenge, just in business in general, I guess?
Yeah, so for the folks at home or watching on LinkedIn, what's the biggest challenge to scalability that you've seen, just maybe in general?
The biggest challenge to scalability is we've got so many opportunities. There's way more opportunities than we have time to pursue. So it's just figuring out, I think, which opportunities should we be prioritizing. I've got a very active board, a very experienced board. They meet with us every Monday, and we talk. We spend about 30 minutes just figuring out, what is the top of mind thing that has to be worked on right this very minute.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right, so on that note, round of applause for Katrina for joining us. That was awesome. Other shout outs, Nathan Slaybaugh with Slab Visuals. Round of applause for Nathan for helping us out. Andrew provided, so for those of you who weren't here live, free coffee when you show up to this. So Andrew, thank you for coffee this morning. And then a big thanks to Bernardo Wills and the Bissinger Room for hosting us for a year now. We've been in this facility. So a big round of applause for Bernardo Wills for giving us this space. Thank you so much. And then just a quick reminder, we will be at some point relocating, so it'll be September for sure, to the Hive, which is a Spokane Library facility just off Sprague. It'll be a little bit easier for parking and a little bit different environment. And Mark Pond with Spokane Public Library, he's their business librarian. He'll be joining us as the guest then. So keep that on your calendar as well. And then, TBD on May and June and guests. So thank you again. That was awesome.